and welcome to another historical fiction author chat. Now, I have to introduce the next guest here, but I'm not sure I really need to because did she write this one? Oh, no. Oh, we're not talking about that one. Oh, we're not talking about that one. Those are two beautiful books. I'm with Natalie Jenner today. Isn't that pretty? Look at that. You have some pretty, pretty covers, Natalie. Thank you for coming today.
Oh, thanks so much for having me on. You're one of my favorite historical fiction writers. It's always a thrill. And I so appreciate that you've been doing these chats with us for the past few years.
Hey, we're all linked by this crazy historical fiction thing. So
Yeah.
we support each other. It's a great world. It's a great little literary world where we're all
Yeah.
behind each other. It's really nice.
Yeah.
So everybody, this is Natalie Jenner, in case I didn't say that. And we are here to talk about Every Time We Say Goodbye, which is a beautiful book. And she's going to read for us all of that. First, I will read you her bio and then the synopsis. It's just a really short, kind of humble bio. It's so sweet. It says on here, USA Today and LA Times bestseller Natalie Jenner. I made that part up, but it's true. The author of the internationally best-selling novels The Jane Austen Society and Bloomsbury Girls, which have been translated into over 20 languages worldwide. Formerly a lawyer, career coach, and independent bookstore owner, she lives in Oakville, Ontario with her family and 2 rescue dogs. I love the whole bookstore thing. I love that you through that experience. All right, the synopsis of this beautiful book. In 1955, Vivien Lowry faces the greatest challenge of her life. Although her newest play just opened in London's West End to rapturous applause, savage notices from the reviewers immediately shut it down. Losing her last chance at theatrical success and desperate to get away, Vivien takes a job as a script director on a major film shooting in Rome's, oh, I hope I say this right, Cinecitta, is that right?
Yeah.
Studios. While attempting to forge a new life for herself in Italy, she gets a last unexpected chance to discover the actual fate of her deceased fiancé during the war. In 1943, a young Italian woman is recruited by the resistance to strike a major blow against the Nazi occupiers who have taken over Rome. Codenamed La Scolaretta, the schoolgirl's assassin's next killing will be an infamous SS commander, a bold, controversial act with consequences that will reverberate for years to come. From renegade Hollywood film directors, acting royalty, and rising stars to Italian princes, powerful priests, and former war resistors and refugees, Vivien encounters a country caught between its complicated past and its potentially bright future, between the liberation of the post-war cinema and the restrictions of the Catholic Church that permeate its very soul. Every Time We Say Goodbye is a brilliant exploration of hope and trauma, love and art, and passion and sacrifice. From the incomparable author who charmed the world with her novels, The Jane Austen Society and Bloomsbury Girls. Wow. I love the back cover copy. They make it sound like a movie. Don't they do a great job?
Yes.
All right.
Very much so.
So now I'm going to disappear. And everybody out there, you need to grab your tea and crumpets and settle back. And I'm going to throw it over to you, Natalie.
Great. Thank you so much, Genevieve. Thanks everyone for tuning in today or later. I will start with chapter 1. There's actually a prologue at the beginning of the book that takes place during the Second World War, when the occupation of Rome is first beginning by the Nazis. And I'm going to skip over that and go straight to the part that people who read Bloomsbury Girls and enjoyed the character of Vivien will be, I think, enjoying catching up with her. So she is the main character of this book, and chapter 1 states as its time period 11 years later, so it's 1954, December 10th, and we're at the Sunwise Turn bookshop in London. Opening night for Vivien had gone like a dream. All the things that could have gone wrong or had done in rehearsals failed to transpire. The audience had laughed at the right places and cried at the end. There had been 4 curtain calls for the only female-authored play on the London stage that season, and extended cheering after the heavy red velvet curtain had fallen to the floor with a final glorious thud. Vivien could still hear the roar of the crowd as she stood on the 2nd floor of Sunwise Turn, the Bloomsbury bookshop that helped finance her writing efforts. As a significant shareholder in the shop, she drew a nice little dividend each year and spent several afternoons a week behind the till. She preferred that time, the leisurely, not even sure why I popped in here energy, compared to the rattle of the morning customers who arrived armed with a bizarre array of requests. Tabitha Knight, their youngest employee, was more adept at fielding those with her innocent face and subdued manner. It was long past midnight, and the reviews of Empyrean, Vivien's second play, would soon hit newsagent stands throughout the West End. Ally McDonough, her longtime editor, popped out during the after-party festivities to lug a pile of the morning newspapers back. Her first play had opened 2 years earlier and not been granted its fair share of attention from audiences or critics alike. The reception tonight, however, had been undeniably positive. Vivien felt inside that strange mix of anticipation and dread that was the artist's lot. The entirety of years of work now rested in the ink-stained fingers of a handful of notoriously viperish critics. As Vivien stood in the corner of the second-floor gallery, nervously sipping a crystal glass of brandy, Sir Alfred Jonathan Knox finally made his move. "Do you think you shall keep at your writing?" Vivien turned to him in surprise at the familiarity of the question. They had only been introduced backstage that night, her friend Peggy Guggenheim extolling Sir Alfred's philanthropic efforts, as he stood fidgeting with embarrassment next to her. "I mean," he cleared his throat. She noticed that his hands were jammed into the pockets of his black dinner jacket. "I only meant that if you were to settle down." "Oh, I'll never settle down." "I'm sorry. I might marry. Most people do, after all. But it won't be to settle." He looked so confused by her words that she felt almost sorry for him. Perhaps settle is not the right term. Vivien had had her share of romantic disappointment over the years, but watching a man struggle to pin down a single word relative to her own skill in that area was particularly disheartening. Sir Alfred's plain but pleasant enough features shifted quickly from confusion to concern until he looked ready to take another tack. "He's going to bring up those children again," she thought to herself with a grimace, then felt sorry. He was, after all, a wonderful civic example, known throughout the nation for both industrial success and philanthropic effort. "The children come to Devon on the weekends to ride and scout and take other lessons. For years we have done our best, my late wife and I, that is, to give them a home of sorts, a place of their own to settle." Vivien had to laugh inwardly at his use once again of that term. At the same time, she felt awful. She should consider a man like Sir Alfred, so generous and charitable and eager to please. Why did his goodness irritate her so? She was inclined to see it as a mask of some kind, a diversion from what he really wanted. Of course, he wanted to help the refugee children in his care, but he also wanted people to think of this largesse when they thought of him. Why else would he talk of it so? More than anything, he wanted to be thought of. He clearly needed another wife. But if Vivien were ever to marry a man like Sir Alfred, she would most certainly need to keep writing, given the limited conversation. Alex's footsteps could be heard coming back up the stairs. He reached the landing, and from across the room, Vivien instantly recognized the look of disappointment and quiet panic on his face. "Oh, God," she muttered, while her mentor, Lady Browning, came over to grab the top news copy from Alec, who stood frozen in the doorway. All the women, for, as usual, they were mostly women up there, lounging about the bookshop's second floor, watched as Lady Browning, with a practiced hand, tore open the Daily Mail to the exact page, then silently mouthed the words as she read. Insufferable prigs. She threw the paper down and pointed an accusatory finger at Alec, who helplessly shrugged as the male representative closest to her in proximity. The few other men present had already intuited the dangerous mood about to descend and would normally have plotted their retreat, but for being trapped by the late hour and the chivalry owed their dates. "I can't look," Vivien muttered while Peggy Guggenheim stepped forward to pick the paper back up. A longtime patron of the shop, the famous art collector, had arrived that afternoon from Venice in time for both Vivien's opening night and the Christmas social season. "No, wait." Vivien looked down, letting her long dark hair fall about her face like a curtain. "Read it to me." Empyrean's portrayal of a group of village women fending for themselves during the war, who fall into a utopian society they will stubbornly refuse to dismantle, shouts its political agenda with all the nuance of a harpy. Miss Lowry's idea of a happy ending may leave much to be desired, yet unfortunately remains the only positive aspect of this often crude, simplistic sophomore effort premiering last night at the Aldwych. "It's not supposed to be a happy ending." Looking back up at that Peggy, Vivien rolled her eyes in irritation. "It's supposed to be abstract." "Crude, my word." Guggenheim practically spat as her Calder-designed earrings swung violently about her head. "If you were a man, they'd call it progressive." "What will Spencer say?" Lady Browning, better known as author Daphne du Maurier, asked in reference to her and Vivien's agent. "I believe his exact words this time were 'do or die.'" Vivien fought down onto one of the large wingback chairs near the fireplace that warmed the gallery, while Peggy Guggenheim took the matching chair next to hers. And as you know, he's not one to mince them. Tabitha Knight silently entered the room with a pot of tea on a silver tray and quickly looked about at the downcast faces. She had a watchful manner, an artistic eye, and little enthusiasm for books. Tabitha's adoptive mother, despairing over her daughter's disinterest in anything except art, had suggested the sales assistant position at Samwise Turn to get her out of her head. Tabitha, however, was happiest alone in the second floor's gallery and event space, where several invaluable pieces from Peggy Guggenheim's personal art collection were on display. For most of that night, Tabitha had been contemplating Guggenheim's latest loan to the shop, Boys Smoking by Lucian Freud. Vivien had overheard the young woman commenting on the portrait's effectiveness due to its lack of context, and Guggenheim responding that part of Freud's emerging genius was how he severed the body from the soul. Vivien had listened curiously, because when she looked at the painting, all she saw was a floating head. Come to Italy, Guggenheim was now saying to Vivien at her side, tracing circles in the air with the length of her cigarette holder. My friend Douglas Curtis is on his way there, trying to evade those idiotic McCarthy hearings. He's got a 2-picture deal to direct and an unfinished script. They'll just accuse me of trying to escape. This is how Vivien always referred to the London drama critics, the ubiquitous they that her mentor Du Maurier and other writers had warned her about. One doesn't go to Italy to escape the past, but to acquire one, Peggy replied with an outsized wink. Guggenheim did everything on an ambitious scale, from her carnival parties and huge abstract earrings to her lifelong enmity for those who crossed her. Maybe the secret to living a large life, thought Vivien in despair, was to go out and do exactly that. I shall write to Douglas, Guggenheim continued. Imagine filming anything without an ending in sight. It would be like trying to paint a peach from a bowl of pears. Out of the corner of her eye, Vivien could see Tabitha Knight quietly eavesdropping on their conversation as she fiddled with the tea serving. She wants to see my collection, Peggy whispered with a nod towards the girl. 18's the perfect age to visit Italy. Old enough to appreciate the history, but not at all ancient looking oneself. Vivien detected the wistfulness in Peggy's voice at growing older. They all were. Vivien herself was 35 and well past the spinster's threshold. Tabby's already been there, she replied, also lowering her voice, during the war. Peggy turned to Vivien, earrings clinking, with a look of confusion. I thought they found her and her brother in Cyprus. Vivien shook her head. That was the displaced persons camp. They were in a children's concentration camp in Yugoslavia first, then somehow escaped over the Alps to Italy, where the Padre hid them. She told you that? No, her mother Frances did. Tabby never speaks of it. Vivien lowered her voice again. After the liberation, the children were on a refugee ship sailing from Italy to Palestine when the British attacked outside of Haifa. The young men on board tried to fend them off. They were all deported to Cyprus for their efforts. That was when the Red Cross brought Tabitha and her brother here. Vivien paused thoughtfully. Imagine ending up living in the country of one's attackers. It would make quite the plot for a film. See, Guggenheim said, putting her hand knowingly on Vivien's forearm. You're already halfway there.
Okay. You said a couple of things in there that I have to ask you that. To start with, I know that, like me, you are a pantser. You write from the seat of your pants, do you not?
Yeah.
You pick a subject that you adore, but then you really have no idea what's going to happen, right?
I know 3 things usually. I know when it's taking place, because as you know, as a historical fiction author, the time period is going to determine
Right.
so much about how the characters behave and what's at stake for them. Where it's taking place, I love locations. I love really examining like a bookshop, and I love Italy, and I love Chawton in England. So that's another important thing. And then the other thing that I think I know, but often get wrong and figure out more while I'm writing, is what's at stake. What is the thing that the characters, because I like to write lots of characters, what is the thing that they all want to do? So
Right.
I knew with the Jane Austen Society, I knew that they wanted to save the cottage that Jane Austen
Right.
had lived and worked in. And with Bloomsbury Girls, I knew they wanted to take over the bookshop.
Right.
With this book, I knew not so much.
Okay,
And
so because wait, where was I reading this? Because it was so great. Oh no, now I can't find it. Page. Oh well, it was about, imagine making a movie without knowing the ending. It would be like
yes,
painting peaches when you got a bowl of pears, and
yes,
I
yes,
love that so much. And
yes.
that pretty much describes how you and I both write.
Yes.
So I have a question based on that. All three of your books, which I love, and actually this one was my favorite. Um, they're all connected. All the characters are connected. And did you know that you were going to do that? Were you able, even if you can't plan an entire book, were you able to plan this series? Because they all fit
No,
together
no,
beautifully.
no. Actually, I remember telling some of our other author friends at an event almost a year before I first got published that I thought I was already in my 50s and I'm getting published for the first time. And I said, I'm happy with just this one book, The Jane Austen Society. I'm not planning on, and they're like, oh my gosh, no, you're going to keep writing. You love writing. I said, yeah, but I don't have any like ideas or plans to do it. So I definitely did not know that anything was going to continue on. And when I wrote Bloomsbury Girls, based on Evie from the Jane Austen Society, it was because Evie had the least finished present and the
Right?
most ahead to look
Right.
forward to, given her age and station in life. And when I wrote Bloomsbury Girls, I said the same thing. That's it. I'm done. I'm not planning to write anymore. And then I got this idea for Vivien, who had been this very vibrant, much loved character for many readers in Bloomsbury Girls, to the extent where people were asking for more. And I'm vain enough and egotistical enough that I was like so flattered. So that was really how that started. So as you write, as you know, when you're pantsing, you do see opportunities to create even more knitting between the books or the characters or the thoughts or the themes. And I love that I throw little things in. Like in the book I'm working on right now, somebody has bought books in the 1860s for their new wife. And they said, I found them in this adorable little bookshop in Bloomsbury where the owner won it in a game of cards. And I was like, so that was just me kind of like alluding to this bookshop, Bloomsbury Books, that I was going to write about, except in 1950, almost 100 years later. So
Mm-hmm.
I have fun.
I love doing that. I
Yeah.
planted a couple in my new book. We'll see if
Yeah.
anybody catches them. But that's what do they call those Easter eggs? Hiding a little
Easter eggs. Yep.
so
Yeah.
fun to do that. So, but you already have this fourth book planned, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
Written, essentially.
and
Yeah.
what's it called? Even if
So right now,
it's not out for a year or so, right?
yeah, it's going to come out in the anniversary year, the big anniversary year, the last big anniversary that I will get to celebrate in my lifetime for Jane Austen, which is the 250th anniversary of the year of her birth,
Oh.
1775. So 2025 is a huge anniversary year for Jane Austen lovers. And it's tentatively called right now, my working manuscript title is Austen at Sea. And part of the book takes place on a transatlantic mail packet steamship leaving Boston for London, for Portsmouth, and then the characters travel on to London. And so it's set in the summer of 1865. The Civil War has just ended. And as you know, I do like to write books that are set after traumatic climactic events historically, because I always want to show people pulling together and finding hope and moving forward. And that's easier to do when the dust has settled and people are in different stages of grief and loss, but are the day-to-day trauma is behind them, the ongoing trauma of war or other difficult times in life. So the book has, among its many characters, a couple of sisters from Boston, a couple of brothers from Philadelphia. And while on ship, they meet Louisa May Alcott, the famous author who happened to take this exact ship, the SS China, in the summer of 1865. So when I found that out, and I'd already thought about writing about her for this new book, I was like, good to go. Like, it's a sign.
Serendipity when those things
Yeah,
just drop into your lap. Oh, that's what I
yeah,
wanted. Exactly. Oh, that's awesome. And
yeah.
you mentioned to me earlier, might be a little Dickens in there. And
Yes, when Louisa May Alcott is a huge fan of Dickens, and she rallies the other women on board who were there's so much seasickness and waves, and they're sort of in the ladies' saloon all day long, knitting and sewing and whatever. And she says we should put on a final night performance of vignettes from A Tale of Two Cities, which is one of my top 10 favorite books. So I
Mhm.
got to vicariously explore people putting on different scenes from A Tale of Two Cities, and that in and of itself will act as an homage to a famous scene in a famous book by Jane Austen called Mansfield Park, where the different characters use the putting on of a play to, 200 years ago, where you're not allowed to outwardly show interest in other people sexually to find themselves in intimate situations in performing the play with people that they are attracted to. So
Oh, wow. A show within a show within a show.
yeah, yeah,
Perfect. That's
yeah,
exciting.
yeah.
Wow.
It was so
Okay.
much fun.
So that leads to my question about with this new book, with Every Time We Say Goodbye, it's all about, well, it starts off all about Hollywood area and that kind of that era and those people, and then goes to Italy with the whole cinema world out there.
Yeah.
Um, and I had a stupid question, but you've got all these great translations all over the world. Have you ever gone into like going out to do research there? You ever seen one of your books translated over in another country? You ever done that?
No, I haven't. I I've had people though send me photos. Like someone just sent me a photo of both my first two books at the University of Porto in Portugal, and that was really cool. So
Yeah,
I get to see it virtually, but I haven't seen my books in many bookshops, to be honest. I just haven't been traveling as much. So that's something I look forward to, and that'll be
yeah.
so much fun one day.
Wouldn't
Yeah,
that be exciting to see that? I
yeah.
wrote a book like forever ago, and I had one translation of it in Italian, and I was there this fall, and I went into every store there was, and nobody ever heard of it, but it was fun to try.
You know, it's so funny being being published because you're so fortunate to get published, but at the same time, it's this incredibly humbling experience because thousands of books are coming out every week,
Yes,
and you know, the chances of finding your book in a shop are actually very minimal. So whenever you try and it doesn't happen, it's just like, okay, you know, it's very difficult to get a big head.
yeah, yeah. But then our readers send in pictures, or somebody posts on Instagram.
Yes.
And there we are, and you're like, "Oh, I'm all over the place. How exciting!" But the reality is different. Well, if I see one, I'm going to grab it. Um, and then I'll take lots of pictures and tell you all about it.
Thank
So
you.
working with all of these, the actors and the people that they learn around along the way, Guggenheim and all of them, have you always had like a passion to learn more about these people? Like you know all the details, like you talk about his Cartier watch at one point and her Calder design earrings, and you know all these tiny little details. You must have been pretty enamored with the whole idea for a long time.
Um, I'm somebody who has always being attracted to design. And I love interior design. I love fashion. I also love film and music as much as books. So I find when I write, and by the way, when I'm writing, I find it very difficult to read fiction. So I read a lot of nonfiction. So I read a lot of biographies and memoirs and long form essays. And that's where I get a lot of ideas for my books. So I do tend to read a lot of biography and know about a lot of people and know how valuable it is to read the arc of someone's life and you learn lessons alongside them. And I love bringing to life these incredibly colorful and interesting and dynamic and often eccentric people from the past. I find like if you can cherry pick, right, you can go through history, and if you look at one year in retrospect, you could be like, oh, well, there's Orson Welles and Truman Capote and I don't know, Norman, Mailers hanging out together, like, and so, you can look at the history and you can see these incredible friendships or relationships and personalities that loomed larger than life. And I love getting a chance to hang out with them and
Yes,
immerse myself in their life for a little while and then see if I can conjure them. And I find for any cameo character based on a famous personage in my books, I've probably listened to and read several books about them, even if they're only going to be in, you know 10 pages of the book.
right. Yeah.
And so when I do sit down to write those 10 pages, I'm just channeling them at that point. I'm not referring to anything. I feel with Louisa May Alcott, I listened to so many audiobooks about her for months before starting the book, that starting the fourth book, that I remember when I sat down to write her, I never researched her again. I just channeled everything I knew about her and it flowed. And I think that flow, that state of flow, is what helps keep the voice very human
Yes.
and authentic. And I really enjoy writing that way. So with famous people, I tend to just do a deep dive, intense, and then
Yeah.
I shut the books and I just go for broke.
Yeah, and you and I talked about this before, how we love writing historical fiction, but we don't want to write about specific people
Yeah.
in
In
history.
length. Yeah.
Yeah, in length. And so this is
Yeah.
a perfect way if you're using the cameos, and Guggenheim is
Yeah.
a good friend of hers,
Yeah.
and you get to meet these people and sort of write a little bit about their life,
Yeah.
even if you're fictionalizing it. It's a great opportunity to do that. That's how
Yeah.
I feel about researching everything about a time
Yes.
period. You know, you start watching something about, I said at one point about when I was writing Bluebird, if she was walking along the street, she had to know what the entire street looked like, but she had to know what that store looked like, what was in the window, and what all the things cost and what they were for. And you read so much and so much, but in the end, there's no window, there's nothing to write
Yeah.
about there. But I
Yeah.
know it all, and she could see it, and that you can feel it. I think it's the magic about historical fiction is recreating everything we've learned, and it comes out visual. You know, it comes out more emotional. And
Yes, it's capturing a time period and what life was like for those people and being aware of it through your research. But what you reveal to the reader has to be critical to the
mhm,
story you're trying to tell. So a lot of what we do is informing ourselves so that when we create the actual story and characters, we can immerse ourselves in their lives and feel like we get it.
yes,
But it's not supposed to be a recitation of the facts. And you're right, I have read entire books. And I remember reading an entire book on the occupation of Rome. And there is one line in my book from those 800 pages.
yeah,
And it's not even an important fact, but it was knowing everything that had happened helped me create the story in a way that I hoped was viable and
yes,
valid and believable, if
yes,
not strictly obviously what had happened, because there was no real schoolgirl assassin. But she was based, for example, in Every Time We Say Goodbye, the La Scolaretta is based on a famous woman who became, I think, the leader of the Communist Party in Italy at some point, or at least represented them in Parliament, Carla Caponi. And she would go out in the night and hunt down Nazis and shoot them up close range,
yeah,
and steal their attaches. And I remember when I read that, I was like, what would that be like? And I wanted to capture that. So
yeah, definitely. Well, you did. She was yeah, she was very endearing, and then all of a sudden, oh boy, she just really went into the job
let
of
him have it.
going dark. Well, this book comes out today. Congratulations.
Thank
And
you.
to refer back to your earlier discussion in the bookstore, or in the where they're getting the review. Sorry, not the bookstore, but in the theater where they're receiving the review and they're thinking about it, and all the things that go on behind the scenes with that. It was reminding me of how we feel when a book comes out. And what did you write? You said how it's both a dread. What was it? The
Anticipation and dread.
dread. Well, I think there's nothing to dread with this book. Everyone's going to love
Oh,
it as usual.
thank
It's
you.
just full of color and personality, and it's you'll learn a lot and you'll have a lot of fun reading it. So thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, Natalie, for hanging out with me today and saying hello to
Thank,
people. And I
thank
wish
you so much, Genevieve. Thank you.
and happy launch day, and good luck with everything.
Thank you. You too. Take care.